So hello again, this is Steve Quarles and Yana Valachovic. We're here to talk to you about making your home better able to resist wildland fire. Today we're going to be talking about your vents and other penetrations. So this is a diagram of a house showing the number of places where you can have vents. So these are just the vent part. Now you can have other openings. This could be a doggy door. It could be a dryer vent. If you have gas appliances like a water heater, then you often will have openings in the room where that appliance is located to provide additional air. So when we're talking about vents, it's typically vents are there for a moisture management perspective. It just so happens that embers can enter into the attic space or crawl space through these vents, and so we want to make the vents work as a moisture management tool and not be such a problem from an ember entry perspective or a flame entry perspective. So it's this vent has to do two things. It has to allow air for moisture management and not allow embers or flames, so that it doesn't provide a vulnerable spot to your home from a wildfire perspective. You're going to have, if you have a crawl space, you're going to have foundation vents, and they're typically going to be on all sides of your home for cross ventilation purposes. If you have an attic, you're going to have vents in the under eave area, and then you're going to have vents on top of your roof or in the gable end. Typically, you'll have them one of the other places, but you can't have them in both places. A through roof vent can be through the roof itself. It can be at the ridge of the roof. So here's, we've seen this home before. We're going to talk about the gable end vent on this home now. A lot of research has shown that vents that provide a surface that's perpendicular to the airflow, and this gable end vent is a perfect example of a vent that's perpendicular to the flow of the air. During a wildland fire, this air will be carrying embers. These vents in these locations are very vulnerable to the entry of embers. And so you want to make sure that those vents in particular can resist the entry of embers, either in terms of the size of them or the number of them. And the other thing that is pretty apparent is that should the siding on this home ignite, the flames can burn up the building, impinge, in this case, on the window, but also get to the vent. And then that in those situations, the vent would also have to be able to resist the entry of flames. So in the picture that has the gable end vent, we have clearly we don't have a non-combustible zone near the home, and we have some plastic containers. These can also ignite, and all of these things can provide a flaming source that can be pretty large to the side of the house. So scenarios where the flames can reach this particular vent are a number of them in this particular scenario. And the inset picture is just to demonstrate that this can truly happen. So before the fire could burn through the siding into the house, it was burning into the attic in this under eave area and the vent area. So in these situations, we want a vent that can resist the entry of embers. We also want a vent that can resist the entry of flames. So we're going to continue on talking about different kind of vents. This is there's two things going on here. There's the yellow square. That's this home has a ridge vent. This is a vent that's at the ridge of the roof. You see here, and this vent is plastic, and that's the disadvantage of this particular kind of ridge vent. But it also, you can see it has this lip that is outboard of the vent. And this has been shown to be a very effective design feature to minimize entry of embers into the attic space. So the air and embers during a wildland fire, the ember-laden air will be deflected up and over, so it won't go into the home. It'll miss the home. Plastic ridge vents aren't really a good idea. But this design feature is a good idea. So you can find ridge vents that are metal, and that have the same external lip. And that's what we would recommend doing. In this particular case, it's good at minimizing ember entry into the attic space. But should debris accumulate, it could be vulnerable from that perspective. So being vigilant about debris accumulation when you have a ridge vent like this is it's just a maintenance item that you need to accept. The other thing is this in the red circle, this is an opening right at the ridge of the roof that is not screened. So it's a wide open area for embers to enter. And before that, you could have had debris entering. You could have had rodents entering or birds entering, building nests in there. So there could be a lot of fine fuels just inside the vent, or this, not the vent, but this open area. You really need to screen this area or block it more. It's easy enough to block this with metal product, actually, to enclose, to make it so embers and rodents can't get in here.
Being able to retrofit an older home to have good air circulation is important, but then choosing the right products and the right way to install it becomes a little trickier. You want to have a venting system because your house would be miserable, both for you and for the survivability of the wood that it's constructed of. So just sort of understanding how these systems work and how to tweak them a little bit is kind of the art in this.
This is an under eave vent, and it's just you've probably seen these. These are vents that are in the blocking between rafters when you have what's called open eave design. So you can have one or more of these circular vents in this type of venting scenario. Homes generally have vents somehow in this under eave area because that's where the air comes into the attic space. Air comes into the attic space in this under eave area, and it leaves the attic space in those through roof or gable end vents. It, like the gable end vent, is going to be vulnerable to ember entry. So making sure that you have at least an eighth of an inch mesh screening, and you don't need to access this from the inside of the attic. You can do this from a ladder on the outside. There are plug-in vents that can just be stuck into the hole here, and so you'll have an ember and flame resistant vent in these areas. The other type of opening would be what we call a soffitted eave, and here we have an example of that. This is where you have a horizontal return from the roof edge to the siding, and in this case you don't see vents here. They're not present, so for whatever reason. If vents had been here, because the vent and the surface here is parallel to the flow of air, these vents are less vulnerable to the entry of embers, and so are better option for you. And so one thing that we do recommend is if you have this open eave kind of design and your pocketbook can handle it, changing and closing it or blocking it in by creating a soffitted eave design, it is a good a change that will help your home better resist wildland fire exposures. Moving on, here are some pictures of the various state fire marshal approved ember and flame resistant vents that are available in California. I've given the names and just the names of all the options that are present. So there's 4. There's Vulcan, O'Hagan, Brandguard, and Embers Out. These typically have design features that are present for embers and a different one that's present for flame. Sometimes they're the same, but often they're different. And this isn't exactly a vent thing, but because it's an under eave, we're going to just talk for a minute about caulking gaps. And you notice in these upper yellow squares that there are a gap between the siding and the under eave area. These are places where embers can lodge, but they're places where easily You could apply a caulk, and there are these fire-resistant caulks, the CAULK caulks that you can sort of put here that would protect these openings from accumulating embers. And if you also recall, we talked about how embers are going to hit the building and come down. So so this trim piece above the door and above the windows is one place where embers can accumulate. It is a place where you could apply some metal flashing that would allow the embers to land on a non-combustible surface. Here we have a couple of a picture of a pretty good non-combustible zone showing the crawl space vents. So that what you want to make sure is that the mesh of these vents is at least no greater than 1/8 of an inch. If it's a 1/4 inch, then you need to put a 1/8 inch mesh screen over top of it. And then doing things like this rock mulch next to the home with a cement concrete sidewalk to provide a non-combustible surface for embers to land, and you have a good non-combustible zone vertically. So this has a lot going for it. It does have these 2 planters that could ignite, and so if there's vents close to it, that would not be such a good thing. So these could be moved. Should these planters ignite, it definitely will damage the wall. And it's whether it can get into the home through a window here or through a crawl space vent. And finally, here's just a crawl space vent that where the mesh is missing, the screening is missing. So this is just a maintenance thing. You need to add some screening or add one of those fire and flame resistant vents. And as we've talked about before, improving the near home area would benefit this house immeasurably because in this case, the siding goes really close to the ground. Talking about vents though, just replacing, doing a maintenance item on this opening will keep out rodents, keep out other things that can build nests, and keep out debris, and during a wildland fire also help keep out embers. A doggy door, I think, we forget about doggy doors. Dogs need them, pets need them to get out. But during a wildland fire, you just remember that the wind is blowing. It can cause that flap to move. It can allow embers in. Probably there's a carpeting or some sort of rug on the other side, easy to ignite by embers. So one of the things as a precaution during when wildfire is threatening is to close the doggy door, close your window, so that it minimizes the chance for embers to get in. The same is true for dryer vents. Select one that is closed except when the dryer is running, and using a metal dryer vent is a better option then. Here's another, just as quick example, noticing that in the yellow square, there's just an opening into the crawl space. It's a crawl space access door where the door is missing. All sorts of things can be entering in that crawl space and landing and accumulating near the opening on the inside of it. And that's where the embers are going to land during a wildland fire and ignite that debris or accumulated material in that area. So reattaching that access door and closing it would be our recommendation here. So in summary, just remember that embers can pass through vents into your attic space, your crawl space, or other locations where you have openings, vented openings on your wall, exterior wall. You want to make sure that these openings are protected by, at a minimum, 1/8 of an inch screening. That reduces the number of embers that can enter, and it reduces the energy of those embers that can enter. So you want to inspect those locations regularly to make sure that that your venting is in good condition. You don't have holes in them. They're present, for example. And in your attic space or crawl space, you want to look to make sure you're not storing combustible materials near those vent openings, like cardboard boxes full of old clothes or whatever. if they're present, then move them away from those vent openings and raise them off of the floor by putting them on a pallet or something like that. Should your vent look like it could see flames, if you have combustible siding, for example, in a gable end vent, then installing California Office of the State Fire Marshal approved flame and ember resistant vents would be a good idea. These are readily available all over the state, so consider installing those. These vent manufacturers have made vents that can be inserted and used in any vent location that you might have. During a wildland fire, remember that winds can push open pet doors, allowing embers to enter. So close these when wildfire is threatening so that they cannot operate. And then finally, inspect your dryer vent. If it has an opening that is open all the time, then replace it with one that has a metal flap, for example, that'll be closed unless the dryer is operating. There'll be lint that will accumulate in these dryer vent outlets, ducting, and they can be ignited by embers. So a louvered vent or a metal flap type vent that is closed all the time, except when the dryer is opening, is a better option.